Hello and welcome to this Innovation Spotlight on practicing the lean approach to innovation. My name is Matt Asman and I lead the Services Innovation Excellence Centre here at Cisco. Now, my first guest today believes that life is too short to build something nobody wants. He's been building web-based products for more than a decade, and throughout that time, he's been in search of better, faster ways to build successful products. That was before he ran into early works on customer development and lean startup pioneered by Steve Blank and Eric Ries. Since then, he has gone on to create a phenomenally popular blog, write his first book, Running Lean, and a second book, Scaling Lean. He has subsequently created a series of products designed to help entrepreneurs raise their odds of success. I am, of course, talking about Ash Maurya. Ash, welcome along today.
Thank you, Matt. Pleasure to be on.
Also with us today, we have Sam Grimmy, who leads the delivery of Cisco solution support in EMEA, including application-centric infrastructure, or ACI, hosted collaboration solutions, or HCS, data center, industry solutions, and the Internet of Things. Sam is also founder of global intellectual capital capture and automation solutions in Cisco services, and an entrepreneur at heart, having driven a number of disruptive tools and process improvements here at Cisco. Sam, welcome along.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here.
Great. We also have Fabi Reason, technical leader within services, working for Sam and driving big data broker, or BDB, innovations, exploring new capabilities, and an innovator by heart. In addition, Fabi is a member of the Lean startup community and completely convinced that Cisco is able to build the products that customers really want. Welcome, Fabi.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Great. And finally, Raphael Wouters, technical leader within Cisco. Raphael's primary focus is the Big Data Broker project, for which he is one of 3 co-founders, which was one of Cisco's first lean startup innovation projects. Welcome, Raph.
Thank you, Matt. Pleasure to be here.
So the purpose of this session is to give you some clarity around this much talked about innovation topic and some practical guidance on how to put lean principles into practice. We'll be sharing some of the Cisco war stories with you, and most importantly, point you towards the support available to help you with your own lean mission. So coming to you first, Ash. There's going to be some people out there who are wondering what lean really is and what it's all about. How would you like to summarize it for those people?
Sure. So when it comes to innovation, there are generally 2 leaps of faith. The first is the technical feasibility one, which is the can we build it question. The second leap of faith is will anyone care at the end of the day? We are living in a time now where it's easier than ever to build products, and we're building a lot more products than we've ever done in the past. So the first leap of faith, given enough time, money, and effort, we can overcome. And that's what we see in a lot of places. So what Lean helps you do is really answer that second question, which it helps you identify what products should you really be building. And then there's a whole methodology for how you may roll that out and build ultimately what customers want.
Okay. So one of the things that we're starting to hear more and more about at Cisco is the term MVP. Not everybody knows what it means. So I was wondering if we could turn to you for a little bit of clarity around that.
Sure. It is definitely an overloaded term. So it started out kind of a very simple concept, but I think there is a lot more confusion around it. So let's start with the acronym definition. So the M stands for minimum, the V is viable, and P is product. There's a lot of confusion around what constitutes an MVP. I tend to have a much more succinct definition. So I describe an MVP as the smallest solution that we build that creates value for customers. So if we look at things that sometimes get passed off as MVPs, wireframes or demos or landing pages, those in my book would be an offer, not so much an MVP. So an MVP has to be an actual product. And as a bonus, if you can further go on and talk about how you capture some of that value back from customers or how you get monetization in the story, that's an added bonus.
Very nice. So could you perhaps walk us through the process of thinking about or defining an MVP?
Sure. So I often talk about, I quote Steve Jobs because he said it very well when he said it's not the customer's job to know what they want. So we can't simply go and ask customers. We all want to build things they want, but we can't go and just ask them because oftentimes they don't know themselves. So really our jobs as innovators is to go and figure out what is it that they need, and that's how we extract what they want. The way we do this is by studying customer behaviors. We can go and observe them. We can look at the problems they run into. We can go and do explicit interviews. But through that process, we begin to identify what are the goals customers are trying to achieve, where are they failing, and from there we extract problems. And that gives us the raw materials we need, as you can call them, to go and figure out the right solutions that customers would want. The minimum viable product would be that smallest feature set, the smallest solution that we go to market with, which starts the conversation, and then from there we layer on additional iterations which get us to the more finished products.
Great. So I want to pick up on one of the words you used, which is around process, actually. What's the DNA of an excellent innovation process look like?
So if we look at innovation, by definition, we're trying to do something new that's never been done before. And what we have seen is that time and time again, where we start out is not necessarily where we end. And so what we have learned is that the best way to really do innovation is really search and not execute. And that's a mindset that, it's a mindset that needs to be changed in a lot of cultures. I work with a lot of startups, but I see this also in the corporate DNA, is that we get into execution mode too early on, and the right process needs to give the teams enough room to go search for a business model that works. In my book, I call that getting through the problem, solution fit, and product market fit stages. And then you get into the scale stage, which is all about the things we really want to do, getting the word out, scaling, hiring more team members, and rolling out the idea. Mm.
So I just want to turn to risk and failure briefly, if I may. Of course, there's no such thing as innovation without risk. In your experience, why do you think some innovations fail?
Sure. So the number one reason that I've found, there are lots of secondary reasons, but the number one reason is that we simply build the wrong product. We simply build something that doesn't deliver customer value at the end of the day. Now, speaking of risks, though, that's also a very important point to highlight, is that we do need to be very careful about which risks we tackle in the right order. So I gave one example just a second ago where we sometimes prematurely tackle scale, and that's a premature optimization trap, is we try to build finished products when we can do a more staged rollout, and we can start off with tackling the higher risks, the highest risks, which are typically around the customer problems and their assumptions about what solutions will work for them.
Right. So let's just bring this into the realm of the larger organization and a company like Cisco. Why do you think entrepreneurialism stalls within organizations like ours?
So in some cases, it is the execution versus search mindset. I find is that we get too much into building perfect plans. So we do there's a lot of heavy emphasis on top-down planning, business plans, business cases, and then we go a lot into execution mode. That's one of the things that I see. And so the analysis kind of paralyzes us. But the other thing that I find is that we often forget to go study the customer. We often forget to go and test with the customer and create that conversation. And then maybe the third piece in there is that we, for the right reasons, we have become so specialized, and that's what big companies do. But some of the DNA that I found that allows us to think more like startups is to begin to take a more cross-functional attitude. So we need to instill kind of smaller teams in search for new opportunities like pioneers, and doing a lot of cross-sharing across even departments in learning. So marketing teams, sales teams, development teams, not working in silos, but really working together towards finding those opportunities.
Great. So what I'd like to do is just turn our attention a little bit to the Cisco organization represented here today with Fabi and TS EMEA Technical Services. Fabi, can you give us an example within TS EMEA of where we've used the lean canvas approach successfully?
Yeah, sure. Just for example, for the B2B externalization, maybe a few words on the lean canvas, where the inventor just sits on the left side here. The purpose there, correct me if I'm wrong, is really to cover the different fields we are addressing, and not just kind of like the solution. that you also an efficient way to cover that on one page. And in B2B externalization, we were very excited about the idea to use an existing solution from Cisco and just connect it together. And we went, according to lean principles, to customers and made our problem interview together with my colleague Roger. And exactly there, we learned from customer that, of course, it brings value if we bring them BDB tag data, but their problems were in completely different area. Their problems were, for example, in how they bring this large amount of data to Cisco. And then if BDB is analyzing it, and we get a lot of alerts, think about 3,000 devices, we may end up with 1,000 alerts and give them back. How we bring back those alerts into the workflow from customer. We never thought about that, and with the solution we intended to do, it was exactly totally not matching. So luckily we didn't build anything at the moment. So we out of a sudden ended up that one team got different answers from customers than we got. As we were diving in a little bit deeper, we figured out, wow, they are talking to different channel. They are talking to a different type of customers. They've been talking to the customers which were more doing the consulting, whilst we were talking to the customers which were handling the network operation. And exactly here is the link canvas pretty helpful, where you start listing those things up. If you see that there are things which are not matching, you can sort it out. You can go and ask more, and that's kind of like one approach. If you ask for an example in Protective, where we made quite success by applying the link canvas at the very beginning.
Very good. I think actually we might just, for a moment, just look at the lean canvas actually. And Ash, coming to you, could you provide a little bit of clarity and an explanation around what the lean canvas actually is?
So kind of the very simple concept is it's a one-page business plan. And so if we look at the business planning or the business case process in general, I talked a little bit about the execution mindset. So we try to get all the perfect answers to questions people want to know. The challenge is that in innovation, there's a lot of uncertainty. So we're often guessing. And so when we spend too much time on those documents, which ultimately no one reads or takes that seriously because we know it's going to change, that's where we run into issues spending a lot of time in that over-planning. So the lean canvas is really a single page. So it's got a few boxes. I often draw the analogy, it's a lot like playing with Lego pieces. You can reconfigure them and change them up as often as you like till the story makes sense. And then we get outside the building and start validating those things from high risk to low risk. And so that's ultimately the concept. So it's really just a way to communicate an idea in a much faster way and then go outside and show evidence of customer engagement or traction, which then helps you update the model. So we go with the understanding that it's going to change from 1 week to the next. And we want to go and build a better model, build a better business model by searching for one rather than building that perfect plan, which from history we know is not going to stand the test of customers.
So how about lean canvas in the context of lean startup and MVP? Perhaps you could just sort of put that into
Sure.
some kind of order for people.
Sure. So the lean startup, I would say, is the umbrella methodology, and it really has a set of principles. Some of them are fast iterations, tackling high risk versus low risk. So that's kind of what the methodology is all about. The lean canvas is one tool within the methodology. So I just described it as a replacement, say, for the business plan or the business case. So it helps the innovator to come up with what are kind of the tenets of the idea and where might be the risks in those ideas. So that's what the lean canvas would be. And then the MVP would be that smallest product or smallest solution that you go build, which is the first iteration of the solution that we put in the hands of customers to then test whether we are actually delivering on customer value or not.
Okay, let's pick on the lean canvas just for a moment. Sam, coming to you, what did you find most challenging about using the lean canvas, and how did you go about overcoming some of those challenges?
Yeah, so when we really started with the lean approach, we did not know about the lean canvas, and it's Fabi who found that for us and helped us use it and apply it. We have globally in technical services a program that aims at doing process improvements. We call them test kitchens. And Fabi helped us to map every single experiment we were doing in the format of the Lean Canvas. I would say that the challenge initially was to really understand what was meant by the different box, how do we use it. But I can say that over time it has helped us tremendously to bring clarity and uniformity across the different projects, and to the point that still today we are using that to report on the different activities.
Lovely, thank you, Sam. Let's just switch gears and talk about innovation and leadership. So, Ash, a question for you around what is the best thing that a team leader or a manager can do to spark more entrepreneurialism in their teams?
So I think the first thing is recognizing that you can't treat new innovation projects using the same metrics as established products. So there has to be a set of innovation metrics, and there's a whole conversation that needs to be had around, in lieu of revenue and ROI, what do we put in place? And if you look at the Lean Startup body of work, we do have a number of innovation metrics which serve as leading indicators for an idea working not immediately, but 6 months, 9 months, maybe 2 years down the road. So that's the first thing, is that the managers have to recognize that we do need a different measure of success. The second one is one that I touched on already, is this mindset that our job as leaders is to give people big goals to go aspire towards, but decouple that from the actual solution. So give the team flexibility, some autonomy, semi-autonomy even if that's needed, to go out and explore a bunch of solutions. And so it's not, again, executing one solution, but really, as long as the goal is being met, which is we're delivering customer value and this will have positive ROI down the road, then the teams can go and they have that autonomy to go explore that. I think those are the two critical elements. If we can kind of shift the conversation around the right metrics and giving teams that right environment, incubation environment for that search process, that would go a long way.
So Ralph, turning to you to actually perhaps make that a little bit real for us and bring it into the context of Cisco. What has your experience been like within Cisco of working with leaders and managers around some of the work that you've been doing in innovation?
So, as Ash said, you start by doing some research and see exactly where you want to innovate. And for that, you don't really need permissions. So that's how we started. When I joined the team with Sam and Didier, a couple of weeks after they had that idea and that vision, there was only one API, so one feature that was there, and they explained me where they wanted to go. So the idea was really appealing, and that's how I joined the team and started to do some research with them on how we would manage to increment on that idea and have the product that we had. So what happens is that we started to create edit feature by features with people that we had around us in Brussels, and that's how we knew exactly where we wanted to go and how we wanted to build it. At that point, we needed a bit more time from us to develop, and that's where we had to actually go from the manager and explain them the idea. One of the biggest challenge that we had was to define the actionable metrics that we would use. We were essentially what we call the minute saved, so the amount of time an engineer would be doing things manually besides running it in BDB. And the other one was the returning users, so that's how we tracked that we were gaining the community little by little. So we were checking the people that were using the product, but people also that were returning to our products at early stages.
Well, Fabi, how about yourself in terms of challenges that you may have experienced along the way?
Oh, there are a lot of challenges. Yeah, basically, I mean, if you want to do innovation in an established company like Cisco, I mean, you are sometimes an intruder in existing nice gardens, so innovation hurts. On the other hand, that's what the whole thing makes the story exciting. I think. One of the biggest challenge we still have is if innovation goes on, which is just some sustaining incremental innovation type of, fine, I mean, I'm going to help you. However, if you are working on a disruptive innovation, which is I think very important for Cisco, that Cisco is disrupting that we are disrupting ourselves. Otherwise, others are going to do it. So if we are working in that area, Matt, believe me, that's going to be challenging. I think this is something people are not doing because in intention, but they are doing it because it's their job. So think about you are in an established area and you are owning this product. Your job is to defend that product against anything. So if out of a sudden someone within your company is coming up with an idea is going to destroy that product, you need to kill that idea. Mm-hmm. So that's something where we often end up in a very big challenge, especially if we start to communicate. Sometimes you can just go like a submarine, no one knows, and then we do the job and dive up. I mean, the BDB guys did at the beginning a very great job there. We out of a sudden came up to leadership with already a huge BDB community. Mm-hmm. But this is not always possible because we need to go at the very beginning to customer to figure out if we really have something in mind to build customer really want. And this is not going to happen if you do that just kind of like with regular project management over years. Yeah, so as soon we are going there, as soon we want to go for feedback, we have those discussions. And then there are different approaches. I mean, we can say, we just figure out if it brings value. We are not touching your product today, also not tomorrow. Mm-hmm, but we are building your product you are going to maintain in a few months from now. That's one thing. On the other hand, it's also going back to the question from the leadership. There are great leaders. I'm happy to be in a reporting line where I have a leader say, you know what, Fabi, go do it. I will back you up. And then we have this kind of like innovation freedom we can do. So there it really depends. But I think there is a big challenge in that area we need to get around.
So definitely a lot around leadership, and that's sort of coming through quite loud and strong actually. But we'll come back to that topic that you brought up as well around outcomes and value and measurement. So I think that's also something really important, also the subject of your most recent book, Ash. But Sam, whilst we're on the topic still of getting disruptive innovations off the ground, you must have had some experience of that once or twice. So perhaps you could share some of your experiences around that, in particular standing up an MVP within Cisco.
Yes, Matt. So I think Fabi has said it very nicely that our leaders like to see something working when we come to them. But maybe it's an exception. Maybe it's not the rule in Cisco. And quite sometimes we see, as soon as we mention an idea, folks wanting to get a full roadmap with commitments and timelines in the first week of the project. So we see that quite a lot, and we have to teach them the lean talk, to give us the room and to give us the time to experiment. It's usually not a lot of resource that are needed other than time. So that's what we are seeing quite a lot.
Thank you, Sam. So, Ralph, we were talking before we came into the studio, and I really liked your story, your particular story around building an MVP. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that and bring that to life for our audience.
Sure. So, when we started to build a community, so when we had that product that had the minimum features for the product to be able to work correctly for the users, we wanted to build that community. And that's where we started to do the first trainings around the world. So we went to all the tax centers in the world, and we started with Bangalore. So at that time, we showed the product for the first time, which was really interesting because I was there in front of a room of 30 engineers doing the presentation and doing the live demo while they were watching at me trying the same things. And each time I was watching something, I saw them clicking everywhere on their laptop, trying the same. And at that point, what I was showing was failing because that was the first time we were in front of that room with so many people trying the tool at the same time. So we were not, the product was not perfect. And I learned that it's okay to come to the market with a product that is not perfect if you are able to solve it. And what happened that day during the training is that I had Sam and Didier on the back of the room trying to fix the problem. They were, I saw them, they were looking at the problem and chatting each other while I was in front of the stage. And then they told me, do it again. Re-click, now it's working. And that's how that day we really fixed the problem really live. And I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example and nice story. So Ash, back to you actually around, we've talked a lot of best practices around lean and on what to do, but I'm conscious there are also some things that you want to avoid doing. So I was wondering if you could perhaps tell us a little bit about what organizations might want to avoid when it comes to lean.
So one of it is paying lip service to the methodology. So I often see, we brought up Lean Canvas, and I've done a lot of work with corporates now, and oftentimes it's been a top-down kind of mandate, which is we're all going to do Lean Canvases. And so people say, okay, we'll fill out a Lean Canvas, and it becomes a checklist item. But that misses the whole point, is they don't understand the methodology behind it, like what comes after, what comes before the Lean Canvas, what comes after it. There's a whole thinking process and mindset change. So I think a lot of this is really, whether we even, if you even hear Eric talk, he's less interested in you calling this the lean startup. If you don't like the word startup, take it. I know in Cisco you guys like startup, so that's great. But in some environments they say we're not a startup. So but the key point in all of that is that there's no silver bullet, there's no magic process here. It's really a set of principles that you internalize and make your own. So how something will work in one part of the world or in one company will be quite different when it comes to tactics. But I find the principles are somewhat universal. So some of the things we talked about, don't think about scale first, think of stages, think of customer value, customer need, go after problems, not solutions. If we kind of internalize those principles, then a lot of the tactical implementations, there's lots of places to go. If you want to look at resources, lots of places you can go and find all those pieces there.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about experimentation, because that's one key ingredient of lean and, of course, innovation. There are quite a few people around the company that I think are having a hard time wrapping their heads around designing an experiment. What sort of advice would you have for those people?
Sure. So a lot of this is baked in the scientific method, and that just goes back to the original lean thinking. And just to simplify, because when people think scientific method, they think, oh my God, I'm going to have to read a lot and run very complicated experiments. And that's to start, it's nowhere near that complicated. All we have to do before we start any initiative is declare some outcomes up front. So much like a scientist does. We don't go into the lab and start mixing a bunch of compounds to see what happens. We have a model, so the business model is that model, like the Lean Canvas. We have a set of assumptions, and we want to identify the riskiest assumptions, because if those ones fall apart, then everything else falls apart. And then we use experiments to validate or invalidate those assumptions. So we may require customers to behave a certain way, and what the team is then tasked with is how can we go in a 2-3 week window, or kind of in that time frame, go and design an experiment where we test that one thing. And if that checks out, we then layer on top of it and progressively level up from there. So that's experimentation in a nutshell. It's nothing more than that.
So experimentation and running lean within larger organizations is sometimes seen as a bit counterintuitive. What advice would you have for larger organizations like Cisco around how to approach it and approach experimentation?
Yeah, so I think the other thing that experimentation helps you do is really measure against kind of the status quo or against a control group. And when you see a lot of other large organizations, and I'll go to places like Facebook and Google, and they're consumer facing, so they've got lots of data points, which you do as well, but they do a lot of experimentation where they are, in Fabi's words, trying to disrupt their own previous features. Can we make them better? And the only way to really test that is by benchmarking against what's already there. So they are the first to want to replace what's already there with something better, but they do it in a controlled manner. So this is again where when people think experimentation, there's a lot of fear around hurting the brand, hurting the relationship with customers. But a big part of this process is really identifying what small subsegments of your existing customer base can you use, and we may not even use the word experiment on them. We may say we've got something new to show you or something new to deliver to you. Would you be on our customer advisory board, or would you be an early user, get early access to this feature? And if it works for them, then you roll it out progressively more. So I also find that in some parts of the world, the word experiment is seen as a negative because it feels like we're treating our customers like guinea pigs, but that's not the intent either. It's really we're trying to serve our customers better, and we're going to try a lot of things with the best intent, but not all of them are going to work.
Mm-hmm. That's ultimately going to give us better outcomes at the end of the day. So there's a big community around Lean, and I happen to know, Fabi, that you're part of that community. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that community looks like and what your involvement in that has been over the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting part. Normally, if you go to old school innovation, you need to pay a lot of dollars to get the information. Lean Startup community, the way how the guys build it up, is really oriented in an open source style. Things are getting shared. And at the time, as I became the first customer of BDB and then afterwards soon a team member, I got addicted, so I did some more research and I reached out in that community. That's also how I got the Skype ID from Ash, and simply Skyped him. He picked it up. I was like, wow, best-selling author on the phone. And that's kind of like what we understand in the Lean Startup community. I've met the Cisco startup guys. Not in Cisco. I've met them at the Lean Startup conference in San Francisco. And also from a Lean Startup community point of view, it's really great to learn from others, because Cisco's not the only large company which is trying out Lean Startup, which tries really want to go to accelerate the innovation with with the Lean principles. There are many other companies, and it's really great via such community to reach out.
Excellent. So I want to come back to the topic that we were talking about earlier on, actually, that Fabi yourself brought up around measurement, outcomes, metrics. Ash, your new book is called Scaling Lean. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that and exactly what that means in the context of Lean Startup.
Sure. So I'll kind of set some context with the first one. So in the first book, the big mind shift or the epiphany there was one of thinking of the business model, not the solution as the product. And so the book started with introducing the Lean Canvas concept and got people thinking about how do we go and test risky assumptions first. So get outside the building, engage customers, because we have to deliver values for them ultimately. So that was the first book was what was around. And so the big thing that people came back with was learning. What I found is that as they would go to their stakeholders, the budget gatekeepers, the managers, investors, they would go to them and show all this learning, and sometimes early traction seemed good, but they couldn't still see the big business model story. They couldn't see how the big opportunity here. And so with the second book, I wanted to address that. So Scaling Lean definitely has a play on the word scaling. So it's intended for teams that want to go deeper in the practice of Lean. So it talks about how do we, as a team begins to grow, as you go out of the innovation kind of incubation team and start to grow, how does the Lean principles still scale up with that? But it also has a play from a product mindset, is that once you've got that initial minimum viable product out, things don't get clearer. They actually start getting even murkier, because now you don't just have one early adopter or two early adopters. You may have 10 paying customers, and they all want different things. So who do you really listen to? How do you really not go down the pitfall of building things out that just one customer wants and others don't? And so that's what the book also begins to tackle, is how do we stay true to those principles as we scale out? So kind of if I summarize, the first book was about the innovator to customer conversation. How do we understand what value is and deliver that minimum viable product to them? The second book is more about how do we talk about the metrics for growth. So how do we communicate what we're learning to our stakeholders and use those innovation metrics I talked about? So in lieu of revenue, how can we show them other metrics which show there's still a big problem here worth pursuing?
Ralph, I'm sure scaling, as a word that Ash used, is something that's featured in your experience with some of the Lean projects you've been working on. What has been your examples, if you like, that you'd care to share with everyone around scaling in innovation or going from sort of concept to reality, and what sort of hurdles have you experienced personally along the way?
So I started as a tech engineer and I was solving my own problem until we got this product built. And I eventually joined the engineering team that would be responsible for the BDB platform. And I had to learn lean development. I had to learn lean principles. At the same time, so I came to a new environment that I was not familiar with. And in that group, I also had to explain them how we were working and how the way we were building things, continuous integration and these kind of things. So, yeah, this was challenging actually to move the organization. And
a lot of educating people required by the sound of it.
yes.
Yeah. So metrics is another thing that's cropped up, and measurement obviously being critical to innovation, and obviously what gets measured drives behavior as well. So Sam, what has been your experience around measuring innovation and measuring some of the, let's say, lean innovation projects that you've been part of?
Well, I think there is a huge appetite for metrics in Cisco and measuring everything. So as the project started to grow, we got more and more requests to report on metrics, on impact, right? How do we translate that into dollar values? And it's very difficult to do for something as indirect as what our product does. So to a certain extent, we had to report on some metrics that give quantitative value, but still we call them vanity metrics. They are things that we know may not be the best way to report. And we have been trying hard to reverse that and to communicate to the team measures that talk more about the actual impact, that talk more about the adoption by the team. So that has been, I think, quite a challenge. It probably to a certain extent still is today. We're trying to solve that equation.
Now, Ash, in your new book, you refer to a new innovation metric called traction. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about traction and why it matters in an organization like Cisco.
Yeah, I think it matters everywhere, and that is that if we look at what both innovators and the stakeholders want, is we want to see that hockey stick growth. And so that's how when we think of traction, we think it's a curve that's going up and to the right, and the y-axis could be more customers, more money, more profits, all being good things. So traction is what matters ultimately. Now, the thing is that traction is sometimes, as Sam brought up, kind of gamified. It's sometimes we use vanity metrics. We draw charts in funny ways. We show cumulative numbers of signups or cumulative numbers of revenue, and it looks like we're growing when we're not. So there's definitely, in the book, kind of a lot of pitfalls on what traction isn't and what it is. And the key point with metrics is that it's not so much about measuring everything, but really coming down to a handful of key metrics, and some of them are kind of those customer value or customer impact metrics, which are sometimes not that easy to measure, but if you invest the time, we can actually measure those things. And if we can report on those things and draw them in the right way, we can tell whether the business is moving in the right direction. So if those curves are going up into the right month over month, then we know that value is being created, and those are the types of metrics that I call for kind of in the book.
And Fabio, I just want to come back to the topic around innovation, leadership, and managers' role in innovation. How did you personally go about working with your management and convincing them that a lean startup approach was better and should be adopted in preference to a more traditional business planning approach?
Well, at the end, there is no need to convince. It's just good. Traction shows more than words, especially if I'm going with my Swinglish, try and convince. I think the key players in the area is really that we deliver the innovations. I can give you a great example on the metrics piece. Fantastic collaboration right now with the technology office. They have the same mindset, and more and more you have the same mindset. You can go straight to the things we need to address, like the IC analytics. We are now working for the IC governance process is something we were able to do all together. And more and more we do it, more and more we'll be able to show the traction. I think that's definitively something which is important. I also see a big play where leadership could help by getting familiar, because at the end it's their dollars we are burning. What do I mean by this? We can always make a great elevator pitch, get the dollars, and then run the project, and then hopefully silently disappear if it's not going to be there. But at the end, our main goal, we heard it from Chuck as he started, one of his four focus area is accelerate innovation. That doesn't mean innovate innovation. I mean, innovation is there in Cisco since years, but accelerate innovation, there is a specific intent behind. And I think as more and more we can show that also, and the backside, I mean, with this lean startup approaches, you may figure out pretty soon that your idea is a bad idea. You should not do it. Failing fast, and that's something which is always not typical in a large organization. So if we are able to show that stopping a project earlier and save with that $5 million of wasting for a wrong product is maybe much an important thing. And more we get guys understanding that it's easier to get traction with the lean startup principles. Because at the end, if it's good or not, if we want to go for lean startup or something else, it's debatable. But at the end, we want to accelerate innovation as long as we are in Cisco. And that's the place where I'm convinced where I can do it. And every time I'm using it, I see by myself that we pivot a lot, we do things different. So it's just going to be much more successful. And back to your leadership question, I think there needs a certain understanding in leadership, and I see big chance that we are start speaking the same language. That if I have a good idea and I pitch it, versus Raf is coming with a validated idea, that's something completely different. I mean, he made his experiments and it's validated, so we already know what value is, what we understand under value, how we are going to measure value. All those things are not there normally by an ID. So from that point of view, I think there will be a traction will show and count more than words. So there will be a natural adoption. But I think we, even as a Cisco, could accelerate if we are getting a bit more aligned in that area.
So on the theme of accelerating, I really believe that leaders and managers have a critical role to play. And Ash, really keen to get your thoughts on the best kind of leadership behaviours that we would like to see within organisations like Cisco in order to support entrepreneurialism.
So it's creating the right environment for these ideas to incubate. So when I've seen innovation happen in large companies, it's either some of the stories we've heard here is that we'll ask for permission later. You know, we'll go out there, show some early traction, get a validated idea, and then go to our managers. And oftentimes those innovators don't get fired; they get more resources, and they're promoted to go and act on it. But the other, and this is where I find the DNA of those innovators are fewer in organizations. So the right thing for leadership to do is to create those right environments. And there are lots of models there. There are incubators and innovators and R&D, but I think everyone has to adapt it. There's lots of best practices. There's a lot of work that others are doing in this space. But the right kind of just to leave it at a high level is creating that right environment where someone doesn't feel fearful of their job because they went and explored something new and potentially disruptive or challenging.
Now I'm going to put you guys on the spot at the end here a little bit, but I'd like each of you to think about and then give us your best tip, if you like, around lean. It could be any aspect of lean. But I'd really like to hear your one tip that you'd like to share with our audience about practicing lean or implementing lean or adopting the right mindsets and behaviours around it. Perhaps Sam, I'll come to you first.
But I would say my best tip would be fail fast, but actually fail. And by that, I mean, when the evidence is there that the assumptions are wrong, kill the damn project. Don't stick to it and try to make it work anyway.
And Ralph, same question to you.
So Sam, still mine. I will shift to stay lean, meaning that don't spend too much development cycle to develop a project or just to test an ID. And
Keep it simple.
keep it simple.
Yeah, nice. And Fabi?
Try it out. Do it. Take the book from Ash, look his videos or whatever. Try it out and get used to it. And really challenge it. Not the book. Challenge your ID and challenge it also with others. Start out asking the right questions, and don't fall back into elevator pitch mode where you convince. Really go back and have others challenging. So I'm encouraging everyone to up to leadership to get clear on the lean questions and start challenging it, because it will help to accelerate. And it also will support Sam's statement to fail fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So understand it, test it out, put the principles into action. Like it. Yeah. So Ash, finally for himself.
Sure. So yeah, this is a very advanced group. So just adding on top of it, I'll go to even the beginning. What I try to get people to shift around is really love the problem, not the solution. And I often use an analogy here. If you start with the solution already in mind, it's like you built a key, but you don't know what door it's going to go open. But if we flip that around, and sometimes that happens, you innovate and you have got some discovery, so you go looking for doors to open, and that's not always the best, most optimal way to find a door. A much better way is to immerse yourself in the customer's world, find the doors they want to open, and then build the keys. So to me, that's what I find really helps.
Great. So it's all about putting it into action now. So if you'd like coaching on your own lean innovation strategy, please do get in contact with the Services Innovation Excellence Centre, where we can put you in contact with the lean experts around the organisation, or help you look into training opportunities around lean if you've got a training requirement. So finally, my thanks to everybody on today's panel, to Fabi, to Ralph, to Ash, and also to Sam. Thanks for joining us here today. And also to you, thanks for watching. And good luck with your next innovation.